moving. So again, thank you all for joining us for our June Partner Convening. Today, our convening is really focusing on centering on lived experience. And when we use the word lived experience, a lot of times I would say people associate that with substance use and mental health, but lived experience really is the broad version of really working with those communities and working with the people who live in those communities and have that experience living and being part of that community and taking that lived experience on how we can better work together to improve the health and well-being for our residents. So lived experience can have a number of different definitions, but really it's being community-centric and resident-centric and using their voice as the center of how we do things. As we are getting up and running, if you can put your name and organization in the chat, please do so. And again, I encourage everyone to turn on their videos because it is always great to see people. Before we jump in too much, we again always want to take a moment to center and acknowledge the lands that we gather on for the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. So as we gather in this virtual space, we acknowledge and honor that the region NCACH serves is on the traditional lands of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, both past and present. The traditional territories of the Colville tribes extend across north central and eastern Washington and into portions of British Columbia, Oregon, and Idaho. The Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation include the Lakes, Colville, Okanagan, Moses, Columbia, Wenatchee, NCACH land, Methow, Nispelem, Sampoy, Chief Joseph of Nez Perce, and Palouse. We offer this land acknowledgement with gratitude and appreciation for the land itself and the commitment to amplify Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as people. And you can see on the screen the tribal lands, an image of where that is all covered. And also, I always encourage you, the team shared the Colville Tribes History and Archaeology program page and the story maps. I would always encourage people to go and check that out. It is a great way to learn more about the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation and the tribal individuals that we share this land with. If you go on to the next slide. Again, welcome today. Again, put your name and organization in to the chat as we're going through this. We're excited to have everyone on board. We are going to be sharing stories and talking about centering on lived experience, especially around as we get into our last part of the community engagement series, really talking about how we lift up and partner with those voices of those in the community. We're going to have a national speaker, Tatiana. And Tatiana, I can't remember what organization you are from, so I'm just going to apologize now for being a poor host and ask you to introduce that quickly.
Yeah, I think I'm representing Health Tide right now. It's UW-Madison and Health Tide in Wisconsin.
And it is great to have her joining us today so that we can learn nationally from those who have done a great job in this. We are also going to have Alma Chacon from Wenatchee Cafe and Oki Hondo from Hope Source sharing some of their experiences here locally. We're going to do a small group discussion and then closing reflections and next steps. Go to the next slide. Again, as we engage in this discussion today, remember, we've always focused on a goal of dialogue and really growing and learning from these partner convenings. And so the goal here is really to come together to understand how we can move forward as a region and grow as a region in these discussions. And so really this is a learning space, not a space to debate. And so encourage you always to honor those working agreements we have in place. If you go to the next slide. And again, what really brings us here today is really centering and focusing on our mission and our vision. So really to advance whole person health and health equity. And we always have to recognize the best way we can do that is together. So coming together as stakeholders, coming together as community members, collaborating across sectors and partnerships and looking at those things that really drive systemic change and really make that difference. And NCACH, we adopted that mission statement in 2020. And again, a lot of what we're focused on is how we can support that as a region and move that across North Central. We go to the next slide. And really, NCACH in 2021 adopted what we call the 3 pillars, or really those 3 founding building blocks on how we're going to achieve and partner together to achieve that mission. And you can see here, really building through a process of distributed leadership or shared decision making, and building up and working with those partners in community and across the region. Looking at how we can share data and measurement, and how we can better lift up both stories and data across the region, and how we do that together in a regional portfolio. Today, I would say we're really focused on that first pillar, especially how we build through an inclusive process of distributed leadership. And again, we're always feeling that we have to be a organization or work across the region with a top-down mentality where we can understand what the needs of the region are. How do we really get out and engage the community to identify what the needs of the region are, and also really help the region and the residents in the community be part of that process, not just gather their input and do it on their own, but how do we really engage the whole community in working on improving the health and well-being of our residents. So we always like to center on our mission and our pillars, because really that's how we're going to do this work together versus how we're going to do it separate. And it's really important that we're all driving in that same direction and that same understanding. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Monty, I believe, to frame today's discussion.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks, John, for kicking us off and for the land acknowledgement. And as you suggested, these partner convenings are opportunities for us to kind of connect across the different facets of this partnership and to learn and get smarter together, and particularly around kind of this shift that you've described and around the pillars. And so this slide just kind of reminds us of a little bit of the journey. Those of you who have been with other partner convenings, kind of really uncovering what this bridge year means, and whole person, whole community, and health equity. We did that in February, and did a little bit on the mapping, and then this final 3 parts have really been around community engagement. So we're lucky to have folks from Rethink Health and Cortico and Living Room Voices to really help us understand some of the dialogue that John was alluding to. And some of you may remember, we had our friends from Colorado State University really talk about civic capacity and civic muscle. And one of the things that they really talked about is how important it is, to really center on lived experience, and really recognizing that there's different types of expertise that we bring. And probably the most important is really that experience that community members and residents, and particularly, groups that are sharing the greatest, being impacted most by changes. And a lot of times those are individuals who are marginalized. And so how do we bring all these different lived experiences? And so that's why I'm really excited about our 3 speakers and folks that are going to share their experiences and expertise. There's a quote here I'll read. I have hope. People are ready. People want to do more. People want to be able to do the work in their communities. People want to see their communities whole. This is Mary Wilson in South Fulton, who we've had a chance to work and learn a little bit with, who's done a lot of community development work. And it reminds me a little bit of this idea that's been coming up, as some of you have heard from John Powell, that being part of community is a co-creation process. And really on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Tatiana Maida, who is with Health Tide. She wears a lot of different hats. The Shares Collaborative. She's actually part of the Community Initiatives Network, and has done some extraordinary work as a journalist and somebody who's done a lot of bridging work across cultures. And I think Tatiana is going to largely talk about some of the experience she has with community engagement, and particularly engaging lived experiences in Milwaukee. So Tatiana, I'll maybe just turn it over to you. I think you may have some slides just to kind of share your story that might just give us some ideas of some of the principles and some insights that you have around this. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Monty. Good morning, everyone. I am in Milwaukee. I think we have a couple hours difference, but it's still morning for me as well. I'm very happy to be here and happy to share a little bit of a story of that is connected with this work of how to center voices. I think across the country, we are all trying to understand and put into practice what community engagement means. And so I think what I want to do is to share what I did, or I was part of a work that we did in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as part of an initiative in a federally qualified community health center. So I'm gonna share my slides and let me do this. Okay, you can see it, right? Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna start just describing a little bit of the story, and then I will make some points at the end of kind of my lessons learned from this experience. I worked in this capacity for about 11 years in this, again, it was a federally qualified healthcare center. It was a big one, predominantly Latino community in Milwaukee. And as you know, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the country. I think last year was the #1. So we have a Latino neighborhood, the Black and African American neighborhood and all that. So this center has one of the buildings in the Latino neighborhood. So I'm starting with this quote that I really like: home is not where you are from, it's where you belong. Just connecting with this sense of belonging that I think we all are looking for, and how it can be a challenge for everyone, for those of us that immigrate to the country, for those of us that live in the country and were born in the country. I see my children trying to identify where do they belong, as they are part of 2 different cultures. The immigration aspect that they also carry, even if they were born here. So the sense of belonging is something that is, I think, also part of this conversation. So I'll touch briefly about Latinos por la Salud, Latinos for Health, which is the group that we were able to help develop. And just what I'm gonna go first about what they did, what was the work done, and again, I will share later my perspective of how that work happened. So the mission was the mission they developed, because we had a visioning process and all that, and they came up with this that they wanted to create and maintain a healthy community and expand education and advocate. They wanted to advocate for access to healthy food and safe physical activity. We did different health assessments. They learned how to do health assessments. And after doing that work, this education, safe streets came up. And we know that those are critical issues in this work, but they came up from that conclusion after assessing their own neighborhood and speaking with over 350 people from their neighborhood. The goal of the 3 things that were very important for this group was community leadership, or for the organization, I will say, in our support to the Latinos por la Salud, was 3 aspects: how to support their community leadership, which was an evolving process, how to help them be very intrinsic part of community assessments and different projects, and then how to develop partnerships with, connect the group with others. This is a picture for school's food policy that we were part of. Here, a few of the things that they were really working on was they developed this healthy grocery stores campaign. So that was the first project trying to increase healthy food access in the 2 main grocery stores in the neighborhood. They really wanted to learn how to educate, and they became health educators. They were doing tons of education in the schools, in parks, in different places, nutrition and cooking. Cooking was a big deal. Also physical activity. So there was how to create walking clubs. Right now, I think they have like 6 walking clubs. We started with 2 and that kept expanding. So how to have these free and safe spaces where people can gather, not just to be physically active, but to connect with each other. We organized the annual Southside Bicycle Day, which became the largest event of the neighborhood. At one point, we have 1,300 people coming. We will give away bikes and different helmets, and we had bike shops coming. So it was a very, very large event, and we did that for about 5 years. And Latinos por la Salud members were part of the planning from the beginning. They were really, and I really attribute the success we had attracting so many people because of the ideas that they came on how to recruit people, how to bring people to the event, what will work, what wouldn't work in terms of attendance and participation. And the last one is food policies. So trying to really go into this systems approach. So we, as I mentioned, there was a picture at the beginning that when we work with one particular school to help them to develop the school's food policy. That was one year process, very participatory process. And also we were part of a larger coalition that was working on Complete the Street. So we helped to get hundreds of signatures that will support the Complete the Street policy and also make changes to the draft so it will be very inclusive and inclusive, especially of residents, because usually at this level, participation of residents is minimum. So that's some of the work that we were doing over 10 years while I was working with them. And I just want to highlight some of the aspects of the process, that the way how we did our community engagement. There are, as you know, different levels, layers in terms of community engagement. And all of us, we are at different points in that journey, and we are all learning. We were learning a lot, and it's a process, it's an evolving process. But I think things that we did, I think that were helpful, they were right for us, was that from the beginning, we were the relationship building aspect. How we started to earn and maintain, not just earn at the beginning, but how to sustain, maintain that trust by showing really genuine commitment and being transparent throughout the process in every project from the beginning to the end. Bring transparency, being that honesty. This is possible, this is not, how would you like? So these are the limitations from the organization. But have that transparency was very, very important, I think, in the whole process. And also humility, how to be humble, how to talk to them with the whole respect for who we are, all of us, how we are, and show that partnership. We are working on this together. I have this hat that I work for this organization, and I have these particular aspects of knowledge or resources, and you have this whole expertise, but we are on this together. So how to be humble and ensure that the relationship is very equal, like at every moment. So that was very important. We offer contextualized data, contents. So it's not just sharing raw data, because people, they need to have data. Sometimes I feel like we underestimate what they can understand or not, and they can understand so much. We just need to put information in a little bit of more simple terms, but especially into context, how this data has to do with them. And so do it again in an understandable language and create a safe space so people are not just receiving information, but the space is safe enough for them to feel like, oh yeah, I can ask questions here, and we can have this dialogue about the data. And then holding a space. I mentioned that they developed their own vision and mission statement. And I think we did that in 3 different meetings. It was a process of drawing and what they want. It was a beautiful process, but in our role as part of the organization was really to hold the space. Holding a space for their vision to come to light, their goals to come to light, instead of our goals as an agency. What they want, what they didn't want, what was a priority for them. And then once the vision is established, how to co-create the path. Sometimes they know what they want, but they don't have enough knowledge of what things are possible. So I think that in our case, that was the place where we say, there are these things that others have done in the country. When they feel stuck, that they don't have a specific solution for an issue, well, there are these things that can be done, and this is how we could help. So that's the co-creation process that we had, how to help them. And all the planning really was inclusive from the beginning, from the conceptualizing the idea until the end when it was the evaluation. This project is done. How did it go? What do we think? What could we have done better? So all that was always, and they felt really part. They were total part. They felt partners, and they really owned the success that we had in the different projects that we had. And I have to say that they were successful because of that. They were really successful because of them. And then how to facilitate the conditions for growth and success. And that in this, I'm talking about how to support them in their own growth, their personal growth. And that required a lot of mentorship, individual mentorship, group trainings and all that, but also access to resources and have this asset and strength-based approach with them. Like, what do you have? Look what you have done. Really highlighting all the amazing things that they bring and who they are, and the great things that the neighborhood had. So all those things were part of the conversations. Financial compensation, that's essential. That's something that I always advocated for, and it was a huge struggle because we cannot ask them to show up when we don't have, we're not having a minimal, and I'm not saying minimum because it shouldn't be minimum. We need to have a compensation for them that is relatively fair. I know financial nonprofits, sometimes we don't have enough resources, but we need to offer a compensation. Otherwise, it's just we're not practicing in any way equity and all that. And then create outside of the group. Another thing that we did as an organization is to create public awareness and a space, try to open a space for them so they could show up their expertise in decision-making spaces like councils or different meetings that could happen. So it was always asking others, who is missing in this table? When if I would be invited to a specific space, and usually those are for professionals, and I would say, who's missing? What is this expertise that is missing here? Where are the resident leaders in this space? Because community-based organizations, they are community-based organizations. They are in the middle. They are not necessarily the voice of the community. The community needs to speak on their own voice. And usually that's a missing voice in those spaces. So how to start creating awareness for that. And then I think my last slide is about the challenges. What things were difficult and things that we could have done better. Personal challenges, I think about from the residents' standpoint, like they didn't have enough time. It was always a struggle how to make time to come to trainings, to participate in activities. So they will always stretch themselves very thin to be at the table. Childcare issues, it's always, has to be taken into consideration. How we provide a very good childcare, not just someone who's spending time with the kids, but where the kids are gonna feel that they are, if the kids are not having fun, the parents are not coming back. So it's simple. So we need to provide very good attention to childcare. And we use in this case the opportunity to really provide education also in the childcare in a fun way, but it was a struggle. It was like we had to create another meeting for childcare. So it was a challenge. Language is a huge challenge for immigrant communities. In this case, I'm speaking about Latinos, but there are other communities like the Hmong community that they don't speak English, or they have that impacts in different ways, impacts in the level of confidence, showing up in different spaces, even if they say you're gonna have a translator. Yeah, I'm not understanding directly. So having a translator is a good thing, but it's not fixing the whole how we feel if we're not understanding and we're not able to communicate. And that there are spaces definitely that are not open for even having translators. So language is always an issue. And also many resources for trainings are coming in English, not in Spanish. So it's really hard to find those systems change approaches. It's been hard for me to find that type of information, the quality level in Spanish. People have so much fear in many of these communities, fear of different things, and definitely the lack of sense of belonging in many cases. So those are personal challenges. The organization, there's limited funding, there's not tons of money, and also certain policies in the organization don't allow for people for the organization to give gift cards or compensate to people. So in this organization, it was a big struggle because we cannot pay, we cannot give. And so it was how to navigate that. It was very, very much of a struggle. So those are areas that need to be kind of changed at some point when organizations are really trying to do equity work, how policies regarding compensation need to change. Mutual lack of trust with organizations and institutions. In this case, I'm talking about not necessarily about this community health center, but when we are trying to do partnerships with others, sometimes researchers come and they always want to do research, and they always come to the community-based organization to make the connection. And the residents feel they don't have trust. So it's very hard sometimes to have that mutual trust. And I'm saying mutual because it's not just from the residents that some residents sometimes don't have enough trust for valid reasons with either organizations or research institutions, but also I think organizations and researchers don't have enough trust with the level of expertise that residents bring to the table. So that's another level of trust that I'm referring. Insufficient staff capacity, we know that's a huge issue that we share maybe. And then growth and sustainability. When we are so busy and with lack of staff, we cannot think bigger. And now looking back, I am like, wow, we could have done this and that. We could have expanded to other communities. We could have scaled up. We could have done so many other things, but it was really when we are so limited in terms of staff and funding, we cannot even think better and do better. And the last two, for me, I think the challenges that I've seen, I think in this space and in other spaces, is the mindset. I think many organizations, we operate in the medical model that really thinks about community engagement as part of education. We're going to educate. So it's a very top-down approach that's not really helping with community engagement, and is definitely not valuing the lived expertise of people. And when we think about equity, which was a big part of this work, many organizations, many partner organizations, and even within the same organization, some people that are in a decision-making position is like not letting go of the power, is holding the power. And when we think about equity, is how we share power with communities in a really equitable way. And I've seen that can be a struggle, and it starts in the mind, and then it becomes a reality when it starts in the mind. So yeah, I have something. I think I have a quote here just to close, that connecting with the mind, how the importance of what we think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create, and hopefully we co-create together. So yeah, that's something I wanted to share with you, and maybe some of this resonates. I'm not sure how much time I've taken, And I'm going to stop sharing. And if there's any initial questions or comments that you might have.
So Tatiana, it's Monty, obviously, thank you for putting that out there and sharing it, your experiences and insights. And sometimes we'll get some chat, so encourage folks if they want to chat any questions. And Tatiana, I don't know, just to check with you, we were going to hear a little bit from Alma and Noki if you had time to stay and maybe see what other things might come up after that. I know that you're busy and you have a lot on your plate, so
I'll be here.
okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I think both putting out the insights and some of the challenges, and I know from some other conversations, just you talk a lot about leadership development and just kind of not all the engagement that happened over those 11 years, but just all the leaders that now are contributing to the communities, and the power that's been gained through some of those processes is really remarkable. So thank you for that. And so as we've been doing with a couple of these sessions, just hearing a little bit of a story, some examples outside of the region, and now to really turn to the expertise that's embedded here in the region. And so I'm going to invite Noki and Alma into a little bit of informal dialogue. And maybe just to start with, I think some folks on the phone know both Noki and Alma, but maybe if you could each just take a moment to share your name, a little bit about what your organization does, and if you don't mind, kind of what brings you to the work that you do, what brought you to this work. And Alma, maybe if you'd like to start, that would be fine.
Sure, I will go ahead and start. Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. My name is Alma Chacon, and I am the Executive Director of CAFE, the Community for the Advancement of Family Education. I'm located in North Central Washington, here in Wenatchee. We serve four counties, Chelan, Douglas, Okanagan, and Grant. And I think as Tatiana mentioned that she would have liked to have started going remotely a long time ago. We saw the need for going remote also, and that's what we're doing because there are so many needs, especially out in our rural communities. But if I go back to what brings me to this space with the work that I do, I think it's my lived experience. I have been pretty impressed with that term coming to light with the work that we do. I believe that that is something that has been missing with the work of schools, of social, political, pretty much our systemic institutions, our systems institutions. And I guess having worked in the schools, I personally saw it having come as a Spanish speaker in first grade and not being understood and not understanding and being placed out in the hall for whatever reasons were at that moment. But so what brings me to this space is the need for everyone to have information, and language access has been a big need in our communities and continues to be. So as I was thinking, what brings me here? What is the biggest need of our communities? I find that language access to information and services is still a big one. Language access especially. And an example that I'll share with you from this morning is I looked out my window, and at the office door is a man standing out there. And one of our staff came out. This was at 7 a.m. And I wonder what the appointment was for or what's going on. So after I came to the office, I find out that this was a homeless person, needed a place to stay, needed help with filling out a form for food stamps and for other services. And this is real life for us. There's just a big need. I guess I could go on and on, but I'll let Noki introduce himself and I think I'm back. Okay, So, but my need here, I guess what brings me here is a need that I see for our communities, and language access being one of the main needs. Noki?
There's my cue. My name is Noki Pondo. Like I said, I'm a recovery coach and a client advocate for Hope Source here in Moses Lake. We typically serve the greater Grant and Adams County. We have a multitude of services offered here at Hope Source. Hope Source in general in this area is typically a housing organization. They've brought on the recovery coach program mainly because they've seen a few recovery coaches that happen to be employed by them put the work that we did without the title into action, into serving our guests that are experiencing homelessness. So and I can go on and on about Hope Source. They have a lot of different things. For veterans, our focus is those people that are living homeless or without a roof over their head. What brings me to this line of work? I work with Hope Source, but Noki in general, like I wear a lot of different hats outside of my organization. And what brings me to this line of work, and when I say that, is anything in the field with having to do with mental health and substance use disorders. In my lived experience is that I was in my active addiction for over 20 years of my life. And that included a lot of prisons, jails, institutions. And I one of the biggest things that I like to do is when I was on the receiving end of a service or attempting to access a service, addressing my healthcare, whether it be mental health, substance use, or a hospital trying to get services right for my physical health, whatever that situation may be. I was real defiant, real hard-headed then. Now being in a different mindset and having some recovery, going on 5 years in recovery now, I'm able to see where those gaps are in services and where some more lived experience and open communication with different agencies and representatives might be able to fill those gaps. I remember for me personally, the biggest thing, like I make a lot of amends in my recovery, and one of them is this: I exhausted resources over and over and over and over. What would that have been? What would that look like if there was somebody able to mediate or advocate in my behalf and speak for me when I wasn't able to advocate for myself, right? What difference would that make? And I think it would make a big difference. Like just being that open access to resources. And so I love helping people. I love being engaged in my community. The community that I stole from, that I took from, that I deterred, like all these things that I did so much in my community. I just really, really thrive on giving back in any way possible. So I typically have a tendency to stretch myself thin, which I'm working on boundaries and all that good stuff. But I love to be engaged with people in my community and being able to bring whatever I can to the table.
That's beautiful, Noki. Thank you, and congratulations on 5 years. And both you and Alma, it's really beautiful to hear how you all have taken some of the pain or exclusion that you felt as kids in systems, and really turn that into your service and vocation. It's remarkable. I'm really glad to have both of you here. Would love to hear a little bit more from each of you. Just what does it look like? We heard Tatiana and some of her insights and some examples. What does it look like in your work to really engage, community members, residents, and particularly those with lived experience that may not have as much of a voice? What is a story or two and kind of what seems to be really key to making it work? And I'll let whoever would like to start, go for it.
Yeah, I can go ahead. I think just kind of to follow up on what Noki said, I think the importance of advocacy, of having an advocate in your life, especially as you're going through some, I guess, a lack of access, whether it's information, whether it's services. It's having an advocate. It's making sure that there is someone there that is advocating for everyone. And I think that's the work we're taking on. We want to save everyone. I remember feeling that way once upon my life. I want to save all those kids that don't know English. That was kind of what drove me into education. So the advocacy, I guess going back to, because I focused on language access, growing up, I learned English going to the schools because English was the language of instruction. English was the language of television, of radio, everywhere I turned to, there was English. So there was, that was what I learned. But I remember my aunt and uncle whom I was raised with, their native language was Spanish and they didn't know any English at all. And so I became their interpreter as they went around to banks. And I remember him pulling me out of school to go with him to help him interpret at some of the businesses that he had to tend to. So knowing that, I guess that lived experience that we went through, seeing our elders or parents kind of have difficulty with what they needed to do, or always needing someone. In essence, we were their advocates. Okay. And we still see that children are advocates for their elders, or family members are advocates. But if you don't have a family, if you're here by yourself, or you don't have anyone near you, then who becomes your advocate? So those are just some of the things that drive what we do. For example, if I go back to that example this morning, what brought him here? He needs an advocate. And so I'm glad that he was able to come here and say, where can I get assistance? Can you help me with this? So that's some of the lived experience, I guess, and the impact that just language. I think that policy is so important because the policies that we have at the local, state, and national level really impact the services and the way we do things, and so if language is not valued at the national level, then it becomes difficult for the states to implement their own policies. I think that Washington State is pretty progressive in the work that they have with dual language, but even then, it's not a statewide. It's kind of a district by district. And so when we talk about lived experience, our children who have a native language other than English, their lived experience is not being taken into account as they maneuver through the health system, through the educational system. And so that impacts their everyday life, their mental health, their well-being, their self-confidence, who they are, what they access and when they access. Because many times they go through school and not understanding a single thing of what's going on until they have enough language. So I guess I just wanted to just bring about the importance of policy and the importance of us engaging in policy to make sure that our communities have the language and access to information. And in this case, we're talking about health. So policy at every level is so important. I'll turn it over to Noki.
I gotta be honest, my mind went off thinking about a whole bunch of different things as you were sharing yours. Monty, can you run that question by me one more time?
Yeah, no problem, Noki. And thanks, Alma. At some point, yeah, we might circle back to just even hearing kind of some policy or a few ideas, as a group. Yeah, the question was just kind of what, in your experience, kind of effective community engagement looks like, and particularly engaging underheard voices. And I think Alma's example is a pretty great one, just thinking about your story of advocates. How do if somebody had been advocated for somebody else in some cases, so they get to the point where you're exercising your voice in a really beautiful way. What does engagement look like to you? Where are you seeing, good signs of that?
Okay. Man, I that's what I thought the question was. The fact that I have like a lot of examples is like, fulfilling for me. One of them that sticks out the most is, so this comes from whole bunch of different angles. This is Noki working for a nonprofit organization in Moses Lake. That's, this is a couple of years back, like they were established, but they weren't as prominent as they are now, right? And as well is, even though this is a standing organization, this is Noki that comes in. It's newer to the community as redefines Noki. So not everybody knows the different Noki, right? So me trying to contact and engage with law enforcement, with different agencies, maybe I didn't have the best communication skills then, not as tuned as they are today, maybe. So working with these agencies with that desire to help these people, one of them that stuck out the most is we have this sleep center and people can check in the evenings from you can check in at 6 p.m. We provide some food, hygiene, clothing, shelter, basic shelter from the elements, and you have to check out at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? There was this individual that Mosley Police Department and the Grant County Sheriff's Department had dropped off at the sleep center almost every single night. And this guy, he couldn't talk. Like, he obviously had some cognitive problems going on, some issues. And we tried to get him connected with any service was nearly impossible. Just because the only thing he literally knew how to communicate, it reminded me of a child. All he knew is eat, food, sleep. So in his mind is he'd come in, check out at 6 o'clock, we'd feed him. And there was times that we'd have to help him like change pants and stuff, right? Because he couldn't even get into the shower by himself. He was just not cognitively able to do that. And it was scary. It was a very, very sad situation, because we're trying to advocate and poke and prod at all these agencies and not knowing exactly who to call and making an APS report and just following up with all these things. It was defeating a lot of the time. We could try to call crisis. There was limited what they could do. And they just kept on bringing him back saying that, hey, he was standing in some person's yard and some person tried shooting at him because they thought he was stealing. When the person, I'm not a professional, but the person literally had like the mentality of like a 2 or 3 year old. So we kept on working with this guy, and then he ended up really sick. We ended up calling the ambulance. They actually admitted him for a few days, and they ended up taking him to Wenatchee where he got some better care. But I think during that process, had we not been able to advocate for him, there would have been no documentation of this guy whatsoever. So even though it wasn't like we didn't have direct results in that process, is that we were able to like provide services for that individual. We were able to give that law enforcement officer a better understanding. It's like, hey, he's not just out of his mind on drugs. Matter of fact, they did drug screening and he had no drugs in his system. He just obviously had some medical issues that were not apparent, were not diagnosed yet, right? It ended up turning out that he did have, I'm not a doctor, but he had some brain issues. He had a lot of neurological issues going on. So we end up finding and advocating for and asking MLPD for help and trying to get connected with family. And so he's living in an assisted living home back in Wisconsin with his family. So it was a win for us, because it had not been for us advocating and poking and prodding for him, the likely of him probably being found deceased on the side of the street or in a bush or in somebody's yard was going to be very likely. So a lot of the cases aren't always so extreme. They're just the little wins and the little feats here and there that make the work that I do fulfilling.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Noki. So, yeah, I just wanted to add, because as far as engaging community, I think that what we find to be successful in our community, we're looking at engaging the Latinx people, the Spanish speakers. And so what we find that works best is to go out to those locations where the community congregates, such as information at local churches, information at stores, Mexican markets, going out to the orchards themselves, to the packing sheds, and providing information there. Not only providing information, but getting information. We take a little short survey of a few questions that we ask every time we go anywhere, just to see what the needs of the community are. And so we really get some good feedback from that. So it's going out to where the people are. It's going out door to door and actually talking to them. COVID has really put a barrier on that. So we're getting back into doing live events and actually doing some door knocking. I think also embedding culture where we can. One of the things that we did was we started a teatro, we call it Teatro Cafe. And that was we created a play on the pandemic, kind of like a historical of the pandemic, and just a way of engaging our community through a cultural theater. And we did it all in Spanish and partnered with some other partners and did a presentation. So again, it's just using language, using the relationships with people, bringing in culture that people are familiar with, and engaging them in those ways.
Those are some really great examples, Alma. Starting with meeting folks where they are, but really, as Tatiana, I think, was suggesting too, it's like, how do we use language and culture in places that really are welcoming, where folks feel like they can show up who they are and how they are. Were those well received? I was curious, the cultural, the plays and some of these other creative ways that you've started to engage community?
Yeah, I think that, because especially when we go out and do outreach at the different, for example, going out to the orchards, we go share information on a COVID clinic that we are sponsoring here in Wenatchee, and we go out as far as Bridgeport, Brewster, and they come all the way out here to get their vaccines, for example. It's just reaching out, say, hey, we care about you and your health. We are sponsoring a clinic, come and get vaccinated. And they come from all over. So that's success. That's success.
Yeah.
And the theater was also good because we also had a theater group from Olympia Family Theater came, and they did a one-day workshop for community members. So not only did they come and present, but they also provided a workshop, and the people that came to that workshop also presented their skit that night. So we had like 3 plays. We had our cafe theater play, and then we had the Olympia Family Theater, kind of like the experts. And then we had a kind of one day put together family play that people were engaged in. So those were well received, and it was great because our Performing Arts Center in Wenatchee is working on bringing in, because they want to be inclusive, that our Latinx community generally does not attend those performances. But when they heard the pandemic was on, then that's when they would show up. So we're working together in partnership, bringing people to different spaces.
Yeah. Thank you, Alma.
Mm-hmm.
Would love to maybe just invite you all, could be thinking, those of you who are on the call, we have a group, feel free to chat any questions, raise your hands, offer ideas, or come off speaker. But while we're doing that, I just want to invite Tatiana back in so that maybe we can kind of just have a little bit of a dialogue with all 3 of you, wherever that goes. And I'll kick off with just this idea of, we have a lot of different organizations. I think some folks that are with groups like community health centers and other service-based groups. And what's your advice or, thoughts, recommendations for an organization that's trying to do community engagement? We talk about it all the time. I know you've given some insights, but a group that's just trying to get started, what might that look like? What might they consider? And I'm kind of thinking about this thread, Tatiana, of humility. What does it look like to do this work, with humility? That's for all 3 of you, whoever feels moved.
I'll jump and say something. I do So having had lived experience getting this job in a nonprofit organization, there's a part of me that knew that I brought an invaluable component to this organization. But I didn't know to the extent with how that would be heard, how that would be received. And like I said, I do a lot of things outside of Hope Source. Before Hope Source was a thing, what I did is last time I got out of prison almost 4 years ago, is I started doing like community outreach for those experiencing homelessness out of back of my van. I just do little things. I'd get donations from people on Facebook, and I'd go around and just start talking to the people that I was just so closely meshed with, because I had in my active addiction, I was recently using with them. My desperation and my wanting to do something different was still there. I had been in prison for a little bit of time, so I had a bit of clarity in mind. So I just went out there and just like, because I felt like this hope instilled within me, right? So I started making what I didn't know at that time. I started like building a different rapport for myself and building a different name. So when I came into work with Hope Source, I had all these things and all these ideas and wanting to do so much, and but didn't know how to do that because I had lived experience on the streets. I didn't have any experience working in a professional setting. That's just a reality. I worked general labor jobs. My most recent job prior to here was working as a line cook at Sherry's. So coming into this field is like, we don't know like what was going to be heard, what was going to happen. And I do have to say, at least for Grant County, is that we have made leaps and bounds and strides is building these like community partnerships. When I first started here 2 years ago, trying to get anybody to respond to an email was like pulling teeth. It was very difficult. And I think one of Tatiana's slides that said something about is like the medical field of it or the professional end of it, not giving value to the lived experience then, right? And for me personally, is I know that both sides are invaluable. Like to best serve that person, it's going to take the professional medical end of it, but at the same time as that lived experience is just as valuable to come with a good wholesome like plan for that person, right? So I think in our community, like we've done a lot of engaging with the community, being transparent with different agencies and community partners to better serve those that we're attempting to serve. Having the sleep center has been like a hub where we can get people that are typically underserved for sure, and for these services, and kind of give like just a spot where it's like a catch-all. If somebody needs services, they can be provided there. The sleep center is always open for somebody who can provide service there to the capacity that you can at the sleep center itself. If not, we make those direct referrals and we make those warm handoffs, right? So, but it was through these processes the last couple of years of really nurturing and being on top of these relationships and rapport that we have with outside agencies to make Hope Source's name and standing with the community that much stronger.
I wanted to add that one of the, I guess, the best ways to engage our community is for all of us providing services to share best practices, kind of like what you're doing today. I think this is a great format. And an example I will give is that we just started a Recovery Navigators program where we are reaching out to work with those experiencing substance use. And it was just so interesting to me that we're working and we're trying to be all inclusive, every one of us in the work that we do. And then you learn about something and you start digging into it and learning about it. I started learning about the work of Recovery Navigators through starting this program. And little did I know that there was already a group of people doing this work. I met Joey Hunter. What a great person. And I learned that there were recovery navigators already here in Chelan County and Douglas County. And I said, what? You know, there's this whole hidden community that I had no clue was there. Okay. And so, so I continue to learn. It's fascinating. I love the work. We've got 4 full-time recovery navigators now, and they are just so passionate about the work that they're doing. So I'm learning a lot with them and from them, and knowing that there's this other support group that was there all along. But it's, you know, I think of one of the questions is, who is missing? Who are we leaving out? Who are we not addressing at this point yet? And there are many people, because if I think about that example, it's like, wow, you know, we think we're providing services and being inclusive, but yet here was this whole population that really I had no clue of how they were being served. Well, I had some idea, okay, but not to the extent that I do now. So I guess there's always so much to learn, and so many people to get to know, so many people to build relationships with. So I'm very, very thankful of this opportunity to be able to share and also to learn, and I guess just to highlight the need for, I guess, collaboration, cooperation, systems alignments. Those are kind of the things that I see that we still need to work on. And maybe it's just because we're so diverse, you know, and there are different needs. And a lot of us tend to pick something that we're really passionate about, and we go and we stay there and we don't venture out. And that's good, you know, but then we need people that will venture out and kind of bring all these systems together. You know, how do we make sure that we're all working as efficiently as we can? And which we started a community services coalition through the pandemic. And I guess an example would be because there were many great people wanting to help and give masks out to our communities, out to our members. And CAFE was one of those organizations. And so we thought, well, gee, you know, what pockets in our community are not getting the information about social distancing, good hygiene habits, and testing and all that. And so we formed a coalition, community services coalition. So it brought a lot of us together to really start looking at what messaging do we want to give out to the community as a whole, and what services do we want to provide, or what are we providing. So I guess in an effort to kind of bring us together and look at the things that we can share, and I guess knowing that there are other coalitions around, I think that there's just, you know, it's a world of information. It's a world of information. And how do we harness it in a way where we can more effectively serve the needs of our communities? That's a challenge we have.
Thanks, Alma.
Mm-hmm.
Very quickly, I think I echo the words that Joseph put in the chat. That was where I was kind of going. I think when organization is trying to engage with communities, and also complementing with what Noki and Alma share, I completely agree with that. But when organizations are trying to really start from zero, is really to try to find that 1-2 allies, champions from that community. And earn the trust. But now, because those are kind of, they can be open, they can open the gates or close the gates, you know. I've been that person, and I've reached out to those individuals too when I had to engage with different communities. My concern is the intentionality of that engagement, and if there's really communities have been used for so long. So how to ensure that the organizations are, the agenda that they are coming is an agenda that is co-created with the community, and is not an agenda that is responding to their interests. And they might be good interests, but they are not the interests of the community necessarily, or they didn't came up together. So I will always just, and those champions are always trying to pay attention to that. You are reaching out to me. What do you want? And that is a moment for honesty and transparency in order, because organizations can get in for a little bit. And if the people later realize intentions that they weren't, there was some level of something that wasn't completely right, they will close the gate and that relationship is over. So I think that honesty from the beginning, even saying, hey, we need you. And that, as humble as that, we need you. We have this project and we won't make it. And we want to see how this could work for you, not just for us, but if this could have something that will benefit you, that will respond to needs that you also have. How can we work it together and something like that?
That's great. Honesty works. That's what my mom always told me. Just humility and honesty. This relationship building is not easy. It takes time, but it's in some ways it becomes as basic as just how we are connecting with one another. Joey, I appreciate all of your being active in the chat, and since you are very much connected, particularly with Noki and Alma and some of their stories, I don't know if you want to give voice to anything else just around some of your insights around what it really takes to be a great ally in engagement and using language, or if you're even in a position to do that.
Yeah, like I was saying, there was a big shift in 2018, and a group of us got tired of burying our friends and having to struggle with finding employment and housing and health insurance and transportation and just all these really big resources that there was no support in for this population. And we started advocating really loud in the community and started building those relationships that you're talking about. And it slowly has bloomed into this like thriving community where people are comfortable sharing their lived experience, because it's turned it, all of a sudden the ACH has helped turn this negative past for everybody into this really positive connection point to connect to the people that are still struggling in their active addiction. And one of the things that the recovery coach training talks about is changing language. And it's such a hard thing to do, even for me. My whole life I've said I'm an addict. And little did I know that just that word addict stigmatizes me, that I can never find recovery, that I'm always in that addict state. And I've really like tried to focus on like, how do we change language and community? Because the community stigmatizes this population, and a lot of them don't even do it on purpose. And I'm one of those people, even who had to look at like how I talked about this work, and in that same connection to the population, and teaching them how to talk about their addiction as not something that is such a stigmatized thing. And it's difficult. It's probably one of the hardest things that I haven't found a solution to in my own path, is being able to let go of some of those stigmatizing labels. I see somebody in the community, I try not to see that addict and that homelessness. I try to see, like a good way to put it, a really good friend of mine told me, when you look at people, don't ask yourself, why are they acting that way? Or why can't they get away from that addiction, but really change it to this perspective of what happened to them. And it helps me look at them as a person, and I see a little bit of myself in each one of the people that I work with, because I was that same person in a state of mind where I didn't have community support. I was completely stigmatizing my own self and didn't know it. I was okay with calling myself a junkie and didn't realize like I was adding to the negative stigma in the communities. It's just really something that I want to focus on in these next couple years in our communities is how can we educate community on changing the language, because it's a very important piece to destigmatizing addiction.
Joey,
thank
thank
you.
you for sharing that. I wanted to share that just yesterday we host a Zoom Facebook live program every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we had a guest last week, a young lady named Natalie, and she shared her story about how she was going through anxiety and depression when she was a very young girl. She didn't know, of course, know any better. Her mother didn't know any better. And so this young girl grew up until she was like 16, until she got some help. And her mother and this young lady were sharing how the mother thought, oh, she's just throwing a berrinche, or, throwing a tantrum. And she would go into her room and cry. And then, so I guess I'm wanting to highlight the need for communication, and that in both languages, communication and information. How do we get all that communication to our families? Because there are so many people that may be experiencing any kind of health issue or need. So this is just an example of this young lady that just got help just about a year ago, because she had to be sent to a psychiatric hospital. And with that comes the stigma that Joey was talking about. So the mother was ashamed to say, well, my daughter was in a psychiatric hospital because now they're going to think we're crazy. My daughter's crazy and I'm crazy because my family's crazy. So all the stigma that comes with getting that support. But this young lady now is a big advocate, and she is going to be one of our regular guests. And I'm looking at ways to kind of highlight her and her mother, who was on our program last night, who was just there opening up her heart and saying, I didn't know any better at that time. And she talked about the stigma, and she was very thankful of the services that there are. So there are great advocates from lived experience. But I guess the need is how can we, as a group, as service providers here, provide that information more so that parents are able to recognize when there is a need. As parents, many of our parents may not have had positive role models in parenting, maybe don't know how to parent. How many of us were just natural parents when we had kids? And so it's kind of looking for signs, looking for support or some information to provide to parents. Children are too young, children are young and they're innocent. But we do the best that we can with our lived experience as adults. So, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And that's what we hope to do with this young gal and her mother, who really want to share their stories and be advocates. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Much for that, Alma.
Another thing that I think is important to note when you're an organization who is looking to adapt a lived experience role in your organization there, I look at like some of those challenges that was posted on that earlier slide about folks with lived experience. Even myself, like I have some pretty severe mental health things due to a long history of substance use. And my employer, the ACH, really supports me with that and allows me to feel comfortable with sharing how I'm feeling in a group setting with my team, which opens that door and gives me not only support with my recovery community outside of work, but I also have that same level of support inside my employment. And it means a lot to me because it allows me to like connect with my team on a different level and to know that they support me exactly how I am and who I am. And I think when I've spoke with organizations lately who have recently hired peers for the first time, and they want me to come to a training with them to help them adapt that same self-care model in their work, because peers people who struggle with substance use disorder, we're always at risk of a relapse. And just because, you know, you get a good career, like, you know, in my early days at the ACH, like I was afraid to talk about my mental health because I didn't want to be judged or stigmatized. And they opened that door to give me that space. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking into that, Joe. You've contributed a lot to this discussion, and I really appreciate how stigma has been brought into this whole conversation around community engagement. We sometimes just think about it about individuals and kind of the most narrow sense, but just what does it look like to really think about language and stigmas? It looks at our whole population and inclusion of groups and seeing people's human dignity. And everyone, as you've given some really incredible examples of what it looks like to move from needing an advocate to being an advocate for really untrapping human potential in the process, which, you know, to me is just really inspiring. Like, why do we do this community engagement work? It's really about unleashing the potential of all human beings in our communities. So I want to thank Tatiana for joining us from Milwaukee. And Alma and Noki, and of course all of you to stay, but we want to just give a moment to move into some small groups, and then on the other side just to hear some of your ideas. So I think, Teresa, there's a couple of questions, and again, just wide open, which is kind of what's jumping out at you that really either excites or surprises you in your own, you know, what are some of your own examples of, you know, what this really looks like in terms of, you know, engaging lived experience. You know, what do we need to do more of? What do we need to avoid as we think about this within our organizations in the ACH? So I think Teresa is going to magically put us into small groups and for about 10, 11 minutes, and then we'll jump back out in a large group. Teresa, is that possible?
And Monty, do you want me to put the questions in the chat?
Sure. Yeah, that would be wonderful. So again, simple questions. What excites you? Yeah.
Okay, so we're thinking 11 minutes. I just had to change the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be good.
All right. Here we go then.
Thank you. See you on the other side.
Okay, so Peter, it looks like I need to put, I thought I had you in a room. Maybe not. Let me assign you Peter and
Peter.
Jesse. Just a second here. Let's see. I always have trouble doing this once I'm here. Okay, here we go. Find you here. Let's see. Oh, Tatiana, did you decide not to go? Okay.
I'm going to take advantage, and I might just.
Welcome back. Just take a few minutes if you all would like, just to hear what was bubbling out of your groups that would be worth giving voice to in the large group. I'd love to hear a couple of thoughts that were coming out. So feel free to chat, but we're a small enough group where we can just maybe just jump in, unmute yourself. Who has something they'd like to share?
One thing that was brought up in our group, Michelle brought this up, is the idea of if we're representing our community and bringing people into our organizations with lived experience, of really honoring that privilege and not trying to change our communities so much as represent them in our organizations.
Interesting. Can you share a little bit more? What kind of not changing them?
Just getting into the, I was bringing up the point of like teaching, hiring people and then teaching professionalism, but how much of the professionalism is necessary. Of course, there's rules we have to follow, like we're in healthcare, we have to follow HIPAA, we have to be compliant with several things, but how much do we need to change our communities and the people that we're hiring?
Thank you, to be sensitive to not trying to change people, you know, a little bit of the example of Noki kind of coming in and finding his voice, but not Thank you.
Still following some rules that we absolutely have to follow.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. What else was coming up for folks in your small group?
This is less in small group, but it just, Tom, what you shared just kind of resonated with me a little bit about, like, when we talk about community engagement, that's really easy to, you don't think of it as a service of our organizations, but also like living and breathing how we want to do it with our staff, with our team and our organization internally can sometimes be important to set that culture as an organization than just saying, well, this is how we value lived experience and community. But then you're right, like as an organization, we operate completely different. So I think it's great to even think about that internally, how you as an organization live and breathe some of this work.
Mm-hmm.
So in our group, we talked a bit about like how to value live experienced and then also though not overwhelm the lived experience as an organization. Like I'm seeing lots of organizations who are hiring the Latino outreach or Latinx outreach person, right? But like, that's the only person that has to have, that holds this information, right? Within that organization. And there's a lot of pressure, you know, put on that type of position. And so how do we look at policy and procedure and all of those things and make sure we are honoring all of those pieces, but also not expecting all the answers to come from those pieces as well. We have to do some of our own work, I guess. And then we started a conversation at the end about the importance of coalitions within our community and yet how difficult it is to fund coalitions.
Thank you, Nancy. And ACH may be part of that solution is already funding some of the coalition work here.
Yep.
But really think about what that looks like at a more robust level.
Hi there, Monty. I'll share not from a place of having any answers, but just knowing who the audience is here in the room with us today is when we talk about leadership roles, I come from a highly academic world in public health. And even personally get critiqued for not having the highest level of education, yet I'm from this community and I live here. And now we're changing how our boards of health are structured. So the boards that govern the work that we do to include community members. And I have historically worked for elected officials. And they're having to lose their seats. They're not super thrilled about having to step down from that role to allow community members to come on. I mean, we have one that's lived experience, but I'm talking about just my community seats in general. You're asking these individuals to be in a room with elected officials, some more vocal than others, and there's even a hierarchy amongst elected officials. So who gets the stage? At times, and I've had a great relationship with my board, but now we're going into this culture change, and I already see a tension kind of brewing, and I've got seats that aren't filled because community members, we're going to have to seek them out to come sit on our board and making them feel welcome. So it gives me a lot of anxiety, I'll be honest, because I don't want to hurt myself or my staff in the community if we have a bad experience on our board of health. I think they're going to do well, but it's unnerving for us and we don't have the answers. And yet we are getting into work that if this doesn't go well, will impact our ability to serve our community members. And so you want to know what keeps me awake at night? That's one of the reasons I'm here today, is just to learn from you all on how I can help bridge it. Because at the end of the day, I can't control what's said or done during those board meetings.
Teresa, thanks for putting that out there. I mean, that's really fascinating. I see a hand up, Michelle, there in the corner. Do you want to?
Teresa, you just made me think of so many things. I I think that's dangerous, right? Like, I think it's, I think what it means is that the people in the room, there's not a mutual or shared respect as the foundation of that group. And yeah, it's going to be problematic, because if there is not mutual respect among, you know, the members of your board, then you all can't move together towards a shared purpose and understanding. And so I think there's some, and I think I see that. I think I see that in organizations that, you know, I saw in the chat, tokenism, and, you know, I've heard from people, you know, trying to diversify their boards, you know, that it doesn't work, or, you know, all of these things. And it's because it's not, the point is not to just have representation. The point is to have shared respect and values. And so I think that, you know, when we start with just counting representatives, we're losing the goal. And I think one thing that's that kind of contributes to that model of like counting representation, I kind of alluded to it when we were in our closed discussion, is that even in grants, or in, you know, how we describe our organizations, we count. Like, you know, grants ask us, how are you doing this, and through what numbers? Like, tell us the numbers of people who represent this population. But that's not what it's about. It should be about, how do you represent as a community this value? And so I think it's, you know, one thing that can be done is activities that kind of get you to that shared purpose, so that everybody can see how they're aligning with that shared purpose and what specifically they're contributing to it.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Chris and Peter, look like hands up.
Yeah, let me just two quick comments. One, I think the last two comments were really spot on, because it ties back to a lack of humility. I mean, I think a lot of time what happens is one of the things that drives sort of tokenism effect is that basically the existing people already believe that they essentially know the answers, and they know what's important, they know the answers. And so adding additional people is just something you do so that you look good, not because you believe that there are actually important things you don't know. And if you don't add these new people, you won't know those things. So I think that's an important value. And second comment, I think we also one of the things that comes to mind for me is the being careful of sort of the bias toward action. If you evaluate success by how quickly you move and how quickly you do things, that will always push you against being inclusive, and it will always push you against bringing lots of people to the table, because that takes more time. There's just no way around that. It takes longer to do that. So we have to be comfortable with the fact of taking longer to do things, and just being very upfront and candid about the fact that we're going to be more patient, and we're going to have a process that's not just about generating actions.
Okay, Peter, see you up there.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that in our subgroup about you know, the challenges of not just creating diverse organizations, but creating diverse processes within those organizations that, you know, respect different traditions, ways of doing things. And Chris, I think it speaks to what you just said about not going fast, but it is all about creating trust. And this is not just within organizations, but, you know, I'm thinking of the coalitions we're trying to build in the North Central ACH. You know, we're working across, you know, a broad array of partnerships and so forth, and, you know, really trying to understand and create mutuality and trust is, I mean, it's a huge challenge. I mean, there's not just a right and a wrong and a good and a bad, but, you know, it takes work. And making mistakes and asking forgiveness and, you know, trying again. It's, I mean, it's a huge opportunity, but it can also be daunting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Peter. Tracy, you put out there an interesting kind of conundrum on, a number of fronts. I mean, just in that governance and some good reflections or helpful reflections. I don't know if you remember Patty Schmidt on the last one from Colorado State University. They have a piece called the Family Leadership Training Institute. And I think there may be something like around Washington State that I don't know if there's anything else in Washington that really is on kind of addressing some of the power differentials that show up in hierarchies naturally that show up in board meetings, just building people's skills, through some basic onboarding, but for them to show up in a lot of different leadership capacities. And I've seen a real difference over the last 10 years in Colorado around how that has started to show up. So that's something that we might, want to explore even through the ACH around what does it look like to really support community engagement and decision-making and power sharing that sometimes comes through boards. And maybe as I get ready to pass this back over to you, John, Peter, I think your point is the great news here is that there's a lot to build on. There's a lot of really great experiences that we heard from Alma and Noki and some other engagement pieces, but through the vast number of networks and coalitions that are coming through this ACH, an opportunity to really practice this relationship building, to practice humility, to try some new and diverse processes. So that's the great news for this group, is that there's a lot in front of you all to kind of figure out how we do this better and to the benefit of the community. So thanks for all your participation. And John, I'm going to boomerang it over to you.
Yeah, I just really liked, Michelle, the way you phrased really a lot of this work is just built on mutual trust and respect. No matter where you come from, what your experience is, we're all in this together and we're all moving it together, and we all have value we bring to the table. And so we need to respect and honor that value where it comes from and learn from it and incorporate it, and not always assume that we are the ones who come with the answers. So this was a great conversation today to hear both from Tatiana and Alma and Noki, and I want to thank all three of them for being able to share the experience. I also just want to thank, it was great to hear everyone's comments as well, and to learn from what you guys were thinking and your thought process as well. Again, we learn better when we share our experiences and we share our comments across organizations, across partners. I would always encourage, if you heard something from another partner on the call that just triggered a thought in your head, just reach out to them and, learn a little bit more of what they shared in their experience, and continue to grow and share really this thought and this idea of really centering ourselves in respect and engagement across North Central Washington. There are still more individuals out there who could continue to learn from this experience and grow from this experience. And I encourage you to, when the recording comes out, to share that as well with partners you think should also be thinking and focusing on this. Oh,
John, if I may just add one more thing.
Yeah, you are welcome to.
Yeah, I first of all, I want to thank you all for this conversation. Thank you for including our voices in here. I wanted to share that North Central Washington Community Foundation just hosted a DEI workshop for nonprofits. And so I think that's an effort for inclusivity and to hear different voices. So I wanted to mention that. I don't know if Claire has any other info about upcoming trainings, but I also wanted to mention that our Value Our Future, as part of their action items for the next 5 years, has included one that talks about developing diverse leaderships. And so there is going to be work being done about diversifying current boards, and hopefully looking at some of the best practices, maybe some that were shared earlier about from Colorado, or whatever is in place already, plus looking at how do we do that in our area. So excited about that moving forward. Just wanted to fill this out.
Where do you want to share any other comments?
No, not really. Thank you for bringing that up, Alma. I mean, I think that training, or the cohort you mentioned, was actually in partnership with ACH and the iSchool Fund as well. So we We're excited to be doing more collaboration and, you know, utilizing these amazing networks that we're a part of. So we're just excited to see where that goes. And I know that we're hopefully going to try to join into some of those conversations you mentioned with Our Valley, Our Future, and also thinking of it on a greater regional level as well, on how we can increase diverse leadership and social cohesion and bringing more folks to the table. So lots of exciting stuff. And I think this conversation was super important for continuing this in our region. So I appreciate it today. Thank you.
And Alma, that just reminds me back to, I think someone made the comment of intentionality, and it's kind of on all of us throughout the community to build a diverse leadership. We can't just expect that people are going to always come up from behind us, but really, you know, as you know, community members and leaders, we should be looking and fostering that across our community and supporting others and giving others opportunities to be leaders. So I love what Our Valley, Our Future is doing around that. And in the spirit of asking if people are interested in helping out and stepping up, the one last ask I may have for everyone today is, as part of the partner convenings, we are hoping to actually move from a space where community initiatives and North Central ACH has been identifying the content and then bring you guys to this space to talk, to really co-create, to see what our community wants to hear about, how we can continue to grow together as a community. And so we are actually creating a small learning task force who's going to be looking at identifying content and how we continue to evolve these partner convenings throughout the course of this year and into next. So if you are interested in joining that task force, please put your email in the chat, and Elizabeth will follow up with you for more information and get you a little bit more details. Putting your email in the chat doesn't automatically mean you're required to be part of the task force, but what it does mean is that you're interested in learning more. You can also reach out to Elizabeth, myself, or any of the NCACH team who would be in if you are interested outside of this. Otherwise, I just want to thank you all for really making the time and creating space to come here today to join in on this conversation. And I continue to encourage you to sign up for future partner convenings. This is a great way where we can really center as a region on some of our shared learning and understanding to move this work forward across North Central. So thank you all for your time today. And Mariah will be sending out the recording in the future with a follow-up email.